Hi everyone and welcome, this is the Apostate Prophet. I don't know if you have seen the news lately, but Brunei, a tiny country, has just implemented the death penalty for several crimes, like homosexuality and adultery. What also came is amputation, the chopping off of a hand and then a foot for theft. This is how we walk into the future. This law was planned years ago, and about a week ago it was announced again and received worldwide attention. Yesterday it was then implemented, although so many unions and people in the world came together and with all violence and fury and anger to stop human rights abuses, condemned Brunei. To look at the law a bit more closely, in Brunei, the following horrible crimes can now be punished with death, which also applies to children: adultery, homosexuality, apostasy, blasphemy, and insulting Islam. Of course, the death penalty is also applied to equally horrible crimes like murder, terrorism, kidnapping, rape, arson, and so on. And these executions are done by hanging or stoning, a very modern way to execute someone in 2019. If we go to Mars soon, we can proudly stone people to death with these rocks on Mars. A colony from Brunei can throw Martian rocks at blasphemous children. Of course, there is also a background of why Brunei started to implement these laws now, how it came to this, why such hardline Islamic laws were first applied in 2014, but that's all trivial. The fact is that Brunei implements Islamic law. What really happens here is that Brunei adds Sharia law to the country's civil law, which makes such executions possible. The reaction to this has been quite big. Elton John reacted quite emotionally. George Clooney called for a boycott of Brunei's hotels in the West. Ellen DeGeneres shared a list of those hotels and called for the same. Whoever Eugene Lee Yang is reacted with anger too. Joe Biden called the Sultan of Brunei appalling and immoral. Moreover, the United Nations protested this decision, which is all the United Nations is really good for. Amnesty International condemned it. The US Department of State warned Brunei, Austria condemned it, Australia, the UK, New Zealand, and so on. What happened as a result is nothing. Brunei made a statement basically saying that they don't care, and that they as a sovereign state can do whatever they want to do. And the country can now in all peace stone adulterers, homosexuals, apostates, blasphemers, and those who insult Islam. When I saw all this reaction, I kind of thought, well, at least the world is reacting, and not just ignoring such human rights abuses, such barbarism of an Islamic country in the 21st century. But what I also thought was, hypocrites. Such hypocrites. Look at this hypocrisy. I don't mean everyone reacting to Brunei is a hypocrite. I reacted too. Neither homosexuality nor adultery should be punished by a state, and especially not with death. Human life is sacred. What I mean is that so many unions, organizations, people condemned Brunei, a tiny country, while being completely inconsistent about the thing they condemn Brunei for. Brunei implements Islamic laws, like the death penalty, for adultery and homosexuality, and apostasy, by the way, which was implemented in 2014, and no one even cared about because leaving your religion is not as big of a right as being gay or having sex with other people. But while Brunei is implementing these laws only now, there are multiple other countries that have these same laws. Here is a list of countries in which it is possible to punish homosexuality with death: Sudan, Mauritania, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iran, Yemen, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. And lastly, Brunei. It also exists in some Islamic states in Nigeria. Of course, we are only talking about the death penalty here. It is illegal in many, many more states, and many of them have something in common. Look at this list. I see at least 3 countries on this list, and one of them really sticks out, that have very good relations with free countries and the West. In Qatar, homosexuality receives a prison sentence by default, but its Sharia ruling would make it possible for someone to indeed receive a death penalty. Qatar is also a friend of many Western nations and has a global news channel that we all know. What is really funny is that Qatar is also currently on the UN Human Rights Council. The United Arab Emirates has clear laws that make it possible to execute, flog, and imprison homosexuals or to deport homosexual foreigners. But the United Arab Emirates, well known for Dubai, is just loved by people around the world because it is so beautiful. Also a very interesting partner because they have oil money. And Saudi Arabia, wow, I don't even know where to begin. Constant friendships with free world countries, massive weapon and oil deals, funds in great universities in the West, and special Islamic propaganda, also known as education, in some of the world's best universities. Or should we talk about how Saudi Arabia was in the recent years elected to the UN Women's Rights Commission, despite treating women like irresponsible children with special needs, despite imprisoning and persecuting human rights activists everywhere, despite equating atheism to terrorism and punishing apostasy with death, and homosexuality with death, and blasphemy with death, or years of torture, like in Raif Badawi's case. The UN Human Rights Council also hosts Somalia and Afghanistan, by the way. I wish this was a joke. Anyway, lastly, after all this reaction, what motivates a tiny country like Brunei to implement such horrible laws like death for apostasy and adultery and homosexuality and so much more? Is it dangerous online forums where such ideas spread that we need to shut down? Is it violent video games that the Sultan of Brunei played too much? Or is the Sultan doing this because of anti-Muslim bigotry and Islamophobia? Surprisingly, all those things are not the case. It is Islam, the religion of peace. According to the fundamental laws and rules of the Islamic religion, agreed by the vast majority of Islamic scholars, and followed by the regular mainstream Islamic schools of thought, Muhammad let everyone know that homosexuality is punished with death, that adultery is punished with death, and that apostasy is punished with death. Islam seems to be the root cause here, the main problem. I'm not sure. And Brunei doesn't look to me like an exception, an outrageous new case of human rights violations. Are we just outraged because it's on the news? Or because it's Brunei, some tiny country that no one cares about? If we want to be outraged about human rights violations, if we want to put an end to it, if we want to declare human freedom to do whatever one wants to do except harming others, without fearing prison, torture, or death, then we should not only direct our outrage at a tiny nation that we all can yell at, we should also direct it at those countries that we don't want to talk about. Those countries that make such laws possible in the world and defend them. And we should admit and recognize and deal with the fact that the root cause is neither cultural differences, nor extremism, nor anything else. It is Islam, the source where these rulings come from. Let's be consistent. And let's like the video and subscribe. I'll be back soon. Thanks, and stay away from Islam.